Hey guys, it's Max. In this video, we're going to be comparing my best bang for the buck 4K video editing PC against the computer that edits the vast majority of the videos that you guys see on this channel, one that edits most of our wedding films and commercial projects, and that is the mid-2017 5K iMac. Now, this is a huge argument all the time on forums, on Facebook, on groups, in person, YouTube videos. People always argue, is it better to get a cheaper option that has much more power, at least looking at the specs, to edit video, or spend more money for hardware that is arguably overpriced and go with an iMac and get a solution that takes almost no time to set up and to use. You plug in one cable, you have wireless keyboard and mice that are recharged already, and you're good to go. So I actually have a full build guide on how you can look and buy the exact parts I used and step by step follow and build this system without ever having any prior knowledge to how to build a computer. So like I mentioned, this is the best bang for the buck if you're working on Windows, if you're editing with Premiere Pro or with DaVinci Resolve. But the main point, and I think the biggest benefit of using an iMac or a MacBook Pro or any one of the Macs, is the ability to use Final Cut. So in this video, we're going to take a look specifically at using a Windows machine with Premiere Pro, which is the most popular video editing program, or maybe spending some more money, getting a pre-made solution that's less powerful, but using Final Cut, which I do prefer, and I switched over from Premiere Pro about 3 years ago, and edit your 4K video that way. Now, I've done a ton of videos on both of these systems already. I'm going to have a link in the video description to a playlist. Now, I also have a full parts list in the video description, each part that I used to build this system. And if you're interested in, I actually have a full video going over all the parts and doing much more detailed comparisons and tests. So if you're interested in the system, click this card above right here, or at the end of the video, I will have a little card so you guys can go and check that out. Now, before we take a look at the benchmarks and the comparisons, I want to give a huge shout out to Squarespace. I've built 5 websites using Squarespace and I've been recommending them for over 4 years now. So when they reached out to me and wanted to sponsor the channel, it was a no-brainer. Whether you want to build a portfolio site, e-commerce, blog, or anything else, they have got you covered. They have an easy-to-use website builder and great templates with automatic versions for mobile devices. Follow the link in the description to start your free trial and get 10% off of your first purchase. So let's start off by taking a look at benchmarks and you'll see how much of a beast this system is compared to my iMac. Now, I will mention a couple of the components here, the main ones, and you'll see the full parts list in the video description like I already mentioned. This thing has an Intel 8700K. Now, that is the newer generation of the chip that's in my iMac, but there's a huge difference here. First off, it's the first kind of consumer level chip that Intel has put out that is a 6-core, not a 4-core. So right off the bat, we have 2 extra cores giving us more performance. Now on top of that, I overclocked this thing to 5 gigahertz. So it's running at an incredible clock speed that's just pushing out so much performance. That guy runs at a 4.2 gigahertz, but if you know Apple and you know their devices, a lot of times they don't run at the full speed because the devices get quite hot and it has to slow itself down slightly, which is true for the iMac. So we're getting a chip that has 2 less cores running at roughly 4 gigahertz versus 6 cores at 5 gigahertz. Now we're going to take a look at Cinebench R15, and this is a 3D rendering benchmark, and here this PC gets 85% faster score. 930 wasn't bad for the iMac when it came out, but this thing is getting 1707, which is on par with like an AMD 8-core that is overclocked, so ridiculously high performance. Taking a look at single-core performance, this PC is over 15% faster than the iMac, but remember, we also have not only faster performance per core, we also have 2 more cores compared to the regular iMac. Taking a look at Geekbench 4, our single-core score in the iMac was really quite impressive, 5,736, which was surprising when the iMac came out, but when you compare it to this PC that has 6,453 of a score, that's the highest I have ever seen in my life. That's jaw-dropping performance if you've been following the performance of systems for a few years now. Looking at multi-core, we have almost 50% higher performance on this PC. We have almost 30,000, and if you've been following PCs for a while now, that is crazy for a PC at this price point. Now moving on, taking a look at OpenCL, which is comparing the GTX 1070 that is in the system compared to the RX 580, slightly underclocked in that system, we have roughly 40% higher scores with this build right here. So this thing is absolutely smoking the iMac in performance, but will it matter if you are using Final Cut, which is much more efficient with slower hardware? So let's start comparing the video editing performance. Like I mentioned, this is using Premiere Pro, that's using Final Cut, and I know some of you guys are going to bring up DaVinci Resolve. Now I did look at the performance of DaVinci Resolve with this system, and it was very, very similar to Premiere Pro. That's because I'm using the latest version of Premiere Pro with this system, and first time in like 4 years, Premiere Pro has actually sped up its performance, which is awesome. And so DaVinci Resolve is very close in almost all these tests other than 2. And in those 2 tests, I will bring up the differences and I will give you the results if you're using DaVinci Resolve with this system. So we're going to start off looking at 4K stabilization using the built-in stabilizer in Final Cut and in Premiere Pro. This beast of a PC took 4 minutes and 1 second to analyze a 20-second 4K clip, whereas our iMac took 7.5 seconds. Yes, I'm not kidding you, 7.5 seconds. And if you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know how crazy, insanely fast Final Cut is in stabilizing 4K footage. Now, this is one area where DaVinci Resolve does much better. You guys can see the results here. It's much faster, but it's still nowhere near the performance of Final Cut. Now let's take a look at a 5-minute 1080p clip with 2 LUTs and film grain applied, and our iMac is 45% faster. Taking a look at a similar project, but using 4K files, our iMac is 85% faster. So the underpowered machine that is thermal throttling and having issues is going much quicker than this beast of a machine with the latest version of Premiere Pro. I have to say that again, that has much faster, much better speed improvements over the last version. Now let's take a look at the most difficult test. This is 4 4K files scaled into a 4K timeline, both with 2 LUTs and film grain applied, 2 of those clips being reversed. This thing just really kills your system. This is kind of like a test of pushing it to the limits. You're stacking effects, you're just going crazy, doing multicam, stuff like that. The toughest test, and in this one, our iMac is almost 4 times faster. This is just ridiculous performance differences on this iMac. Now this is the other area where DaVinci Resolve did much faster than Premiere Pro, and it actually about matched Final Cut. And this is weird because it actually used to do much slower in this test where we push it to its limits, but with the latest release of DaVinci Resolve, they redid all the code and they made it much faster and more efficient, and now we're getting some crazy good speed. So if you're really pushing your system, DaVinci Resolve seems like a good way to go. So along with these speed differences, the actual timeline performance is also much better in Final Cut. It rarely stutters. I can play back all of these files in full resolution, even with effects, because of how efficient it works. These kind of numbers just go along with the efficiency when you're in the timeline. With that said, this system can still handle 4K. Yes, you're waiting longer to render, but it really cuts through 4K like butter. You guys could see the full video of this linked in the video description where I go into all the details and show you all the specs and do much more testing. If you're using Premiere Pro, this is still a great way to go and you're gonna have a great experience editing. But compared to Final Cut on the iMac, man, does that thing just scream. Super smooth, no issues when you're cutting through files, even with a bunch of effects. Now to finish off these tests, we wanna look at H.265 footage. So if you're shooting with a new camera that records H.265, maybe like a DJI drone or some future cameras that are gonna start utilizing this codec more often, how does that perform? First off, let's start out with the 4K project, 5 minutes, 2 LUTs, film grain applied like previously, but we're looking at H.265 files. This time we're gonna render to H.264, so you're still stuck in your ways, rendering to standard MP4 and then uploading that. Now in this scenario, the PC is actually 40% faster. Very surprising. This is the first time where it's moving ahead, doing better than the iMac. Now, if we actually edit the H.265 or HEVC files and we render to HEVC, which makes a lot more logical sense. And when I do this, I always render to HEVC. There's no point of rendering to a file format that takes up much more space or is going to have less quality, and most websites now accept uploads in HEVC, so you're going to save yourself uploading time as well and storage space. In this case, HEVC to HEVC, our iMac is roughly 15% faster. Not a huge difference, but it is better in that regard. So now the big question, should you buy yourself a PC and use Premiere Pro, or should you buy an iMac? Well, honestly, I would say think about your position. If you're already making money doing photography, doing filmmaking, and you don't have a ton of extra time, you need to get work done, or let's say you're like a lot of people out there who work a full-time job already and you do this on the side, I would say go with the iMac. You don't have to build a system, you don't have to think about the parts, install drivers, deal with any of that. You get a box in the mail, you plug it in, download Final Cut, and literally within like 15 minutes, you're ready to be editing. What I will say though is if you're buying an iMac, definitely check out Final Cut. If you're gonna be using Premiere Pro on an iMac, this thing is going to smoke it. No doubt about it. With all that extra performance using the same program, it's going to do better. And actually, Premiere Pro runs slightly faster on Windows than it does on Mac OS. It might be more stable on Mac OS, but it does perform better on Windows. And I think I do have a video about that if you guys search my channel. So personally, if you're already making money, go that route. But if you're somebody getting into the industry and you want to collaborate with other people that use Premiere Pro, you're on a budget, you have the extra time, or you enjoy tinkering and building systems or electronics, you enjoy the hobby, this thing is still going to do a great job. It's still going to cut through 4K quite well. But this video just points out to everybody out there who wants to get a system or just prefers Apple's products, or you want to not have to worry about things and just get a simple system you don't have to think about and edit. And you're using Final Cut, that's the key thing, you're going to get great performance. Don't let anybody like bully you into saying your Apple computer sucks. You'd be much faster with a Windows PC that's much more powerful using Premiere Pro. It simply is not true. Send them a link to this video. Now, to finish all this up, we got to talk about prices. I probably should have talked about this in the beginning, but this system cost me $1,350 to build. With that said, prices do rise and fall. Right now, graphics card prices are through the roof. RAM prices are also very expensive. SSD prices have went up. If you're buying this system today, I think it's probably roughly like $1,500, $1,600 in that price range. You guys could go check out the links. If you guys buy through those, that helps support the channel, supports videos like this one. But those prices are slightly higher now. You also still have to buy speakers, keyboard, a mouse, multiple mice, and a monitor. So that hikes up the price as well. And if you're going to get a monitor that good as on the iMac, you're going to spend roughly $1,500. So you're right there. You're spending, once you add in those other accessories, you're spending more money than you would on the iMac. But that's also not completely fair because most people, if they're building a budget system, they're not going to spend $200 on a keyboard and a mouse. They're not going to buy expensive speakers most likely, and they may already have a monitor, or they're going to buy a best bang for the buck one. And I'll link the best bang for the buck 4K monitor. It's roughly $500 in price. So you're still cheaper going with a system like this for most people. So there's always the kind of, you can toss which way, one way or another. Obviously with Final Cut, you pay for it once. You're done. You don't have to pay for it again. With Premiere Pro, you have to pay each and every month. So that's that, guys. You saw the numbers for yourselves. The iMac did quite well, even though it's has a lot less performance and it's a lot underpowered compared to this system. Let me know what you guys thought. Once again, I have a full step-by-step build guide. So if you do want to build a system like this, you are stuck with Premiere Pro, definitely go check that out. It's going to make it extremely easy to build it. The full parts lists are below, and I'm going to link to the iMac as well. I keep looking over that way. It's right over there, just so you guys know why I'm looking that way. Thank you guys for watching. Once again, thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Seriously, guys, I love Squarespace. I have been recommending them for 4 years now. That is no joke. I love it. If I'm building any website, I'm always going to Squarespace. I'm referring all my friends and family there. So thank you guys for sponsoring the channel. I have a link to Squarespace down below. If you're going to go check it out, definitely use that link. That just helps them to keep wanting to sponsor videos like this. And if you guys want to enable those notifications and hit that subscribe button, you guys will see a lot of great videos on cameras, filmmaking, a little bit of photography, everything that has to do with it, including systems like this one and like that one, and video editing stuff. Thank you for watching. This has been Max. I gotta go babysit my kids now or watch my kids, and I will see you guys in the next video.